Hello, I'm going to be talking about instant messaging today, or IM. I'm not sure how many people listening to this episode will understand what that means because it's a bit of an old-fashioned terminology now, a bit of an old-fashioned word that doesn't seem to see much use anymore. Well, actually, I can't believe I'm saying it's old-fashioned. It really isn't that old. But because it's related to technology, things that are related to technology can go out of fashion very, very quickly. So, what is IM? What is instant messaging? Years ago, if you're old enough, you might remember this. You might have experience with this. So, years ago, before the invention of smartphones and tablets and things like that, where everyone... Well, not everyone, but people who wanted to connect to the internet had a computer, usually a big desktop computer or sometimes a laptop. If you wanted to chat with people over the internet, one of the ways of doing this was with some messaging software. And there were quite a few to choose from. There was MSN Messenger, which was a Microsoft Network Messenger. Yahoo had one. Who else? AOL, America Online, had one. I remember others called ICQ. That was one. There was one called Trillion, which I think combined all the different messaging protocols into one application or something like that. I feel like I'm also forgetting some others, but it's not really important. What's important is that these things existed and they were popular, and it was one of the ways you could communicate to people via text over the internet. At the time that these were popular, I would have been... I remember using them when I was at secondary school, towards the sort of later years of secondary school. So perhaps I was around 14 or 15 when I was using these. And at that age, and don't forget this is before smartphones and all things like that, they were amazing because it was a way that you could keep in contact with your friends. Obviously we had telephones back then, but telephones... or telephone calls rather, were perhaps a little expensive, especially expensive for a teenager who's not earning any money at all, so you didn't really have any way of paying for things. So instant messaging allowed you to send sort of as many messages as you wanted for free. It wasn't free because you had to buy a computer and you had to pay for the electricity and you had to pay for the internet bills, but once you'd paid for all of those things, and yes, you didn't have to pay per message. The only other way I think I had of keeping in contact with friends back then would have been like an old style mobile phone, and you were sending text messages on the mobile phone, and it was a bit of a pain typing them into the keyboards, numeric keyboards, the ones that, just made up of numbers. So that was slow, and every message you would send would cost 10p, so 10 messages and there goes £1. And I remember like almost never using SMS, text messages on a phone, just because it was like, well, it's going to cost 10p, isn't it? And I'm eating into my credit. So you always had to think, maybe you didn't if you had a lot of money, but like I said, a teenager who doesn't have much money, you're always thinking like, should I send this message? Maybe it's not that important. Maybe I don't need to send it. I'll just wait until I can speak to my friend at school tomorrow or something like that. But no, instant messaging just let you send long messages, as many messages as you want. You've got a whole keyboard to type on. It made it easier to enter your message. It really was good fun. And like I said, great for young people without any money, especially. Now, what happened to these things? I think we all know the answer to that. They just sort of died. And they died because I guess they sort of like mutated. They changed into something else. So, I don't know, your modern messaging app, Signal or WhatsApp or something like that, are sort of the continuation of what these things used to be. But also in some ways, they are rather different. And there's some elements about the old instant messengers that I really rather miss. And I suppose actually the one I miss the most is the clean separation between offline and online. So when you weren't connected to the internet, when you weren't using your computer, you didn't receive any messages. Obviously, it's not like today where you're carrying a computer in your pocket, carrying a smartphone in your pocket, and at any time of the day or night you can receive a message. No, it wasn't like that at all. You would only receive one when you were online, on your computer and online on the internet, and connected to this particular network, this application. And what would happen if someone tried to send you a message when you weren't online? They couldn't. That's how it worked initially. If someone wasn't online, you wouldn't be able to send them a message. And it was that simple. So whatever you wanted to say to someone would just have to wait. I suppose it was more like how things happen in real life, where if you can't talk to someone, you just wait until you see them and then you can tell them what you want. And yet when I talk about that now, it just feels weird. Like, what? You had to wait till someone was on the internet before you could send them a message? I mean, today it sounds weird because there is no on and off for the internet, is there? I mean, I suppose you can disconnect from the internet, but how many of us actually do that? How many of us turn Wi-Fi off and turn mobile data off on our smartphones or whatever? The expectation is that they'll just be connected to the internet all the time. But back then, connecting to the internet cost money. You would pay per minute. So if you left it if you left it on all the time, you'd spend quite a bit of money. So that wasn't an option anyway. But the upside of that, the good point about that is that there was this clean separation. You couldn't, once you stepped away from the computer, that's it. You were disconnected from that instant messenger. You wouldn't receive any messages. That it would just, people couldn't even send you messages, like I was saying, or at least that's how they used to work initially. I do remember a point in time. I used to use Microsoft Network, MSN Messenger. And I remember there was a new release and they added this feature that was offline messaging. So you could send someone a message even if they weren't online. And I remember thinking at the time, this is amazing. This is groundbreaking, this advancement in technology. So I would want to speak to one of my friends and they were offline, and then I'd just send them a message anyway. And then as soon as they came online, they would see this little pop-up from me that said, I sent them this message, and then they could reply. And I think it was a genuinely useful feature. I think it was a good thing. Like when I started using it, or when everyone started using it, maybe we were all thinking like, how did we use this thing before? Back in the days when we didn't have offline messaging. But I also remember thinking at the time, and I was very young, like a young teenager back then. I also remember thinking, but hang on, sometimes I'm logging in here and I'll get like 5 different pop-up notifications, like someone sent you a message and someone else sent you a message, someone else has sent you a message. And it just feels like as soon as I log in, as soon as I'm online, I've got these things that I've got to do, vying for my attention. So it was a bit of a double-edged sword. It was a good thing and maybe a bad thing at the same time. But like I said, this was still in the time when offline meant, no more notifications. Step away from the computer and everything's back to normal, nice and calm. You can focus on whatever you want to focus on without being interrupted by noises and flashing whatever. Now, there is another feature that I really miss that these instant messaging applications used to have, which I still haven't seen on any of the modern equivalents, and that is a status. You used to have an actual online status that you could set. So you'd be connected to your messaging application, your instant messenger, and you'd have like a green icon next to your name, and the green meant online. And you could change that online status. You could change it to yellow, which meant busy. And then I think red was offline. And you could choose any of those. And that was great because you could be online, but then you could change your status to busy. So other people would see you and they'd see this orange icon and they'd think, oh, they're busy. So maybe they wouldn't contact you freely. But maybe they, if it was important, they'd say, I know you're busy, but I need to talk about this or something. And so they already knew. It was great. They already knew that you might be busy before they even contacted you. And so maybe you'd get less contact or something like that. Actually, I seem to remember another option which was do not disturb. I mean, my memory's a bit hazy about, exactly what they were, because we're going back, I don't know, how long was it? Over 20 years, I should imagine. But I'm pretty sure, depending on which instant messaging application you were using, there probably was a do not disturb state. So that's don't talk to me unless it's important. Maybe that's a bit different from the feeling of the word busy. Or maybe it's the same. Do not disturb is a bit stronger, isn't it? And then I think the final state was offline. So you could set yourself to appear as though you were away. Oh, that was it, away. It was titled away. Again, it depends on the application you were using. But you could set yourself as away, like you're not really here, and then no one could contact you. You could see them. You could see who was online and who was offline, but they could not see that you were online, so they couldn't send you messages. So that just meant you could, I don't know, maybe you just wanted to wait until a particular person came online that you needed to speak to, but you didn't want to receive loads of messages from people. You wanted to focus on things. Anyway, the point is that it was a great feature, being able to set that status, and it just does not exist in any, well, not that I know to, maybe there are some, but in any of the major ones that I've seen or used, this sort of status doesn't exist. I've seen status messages where you can say like, I am doing this or something, but I just mean like setting yourself as busy or away, and that changes who can contact you and all that kind of thing. I haven't seen that. I do really miss that, because one thing that I think we are sort of missing out on with these modern applications is, because you can send a message to anyone at any point in time, day or night, it almost feels, I mean, me personally, I feel like I contact people less because of this. I'm conscious of the fact that I might be intruding. I'm aware that I might be trying to contact someone when they're busy. So that makes me a bit more reserved about contacting them. With these old instant messengers, with the status thing, if you set yourself online, if you had a big green light next to your name, that was sort of like saying, I'm available for chat. Anyone who wants to talk to me, come and talk to me. I'm free. I'm sitting here. I'm ready. So it was like much more inviting. And if someone was busy, you would see the orange icon, the busy icon, or the do not disturb icon, or whatever it was. So I think that's it, really. Those are the two features that I feel that we're missing out on. That sort of being able to step away from things. I guess you can sort of turn the internet off on your phone or whatever, and that's similar, isn't it? But that status feature, that was a good feature, and I do miss that. I think if I was to open up one of the messaging applications I use now, like Signal, and I could see these like status lights next to people's names, and I saw like my friends had like these green lights, I'd just think, okay, you're free, I'll just start chatting to you then. So, I wouldn't feel so reserved, wondering like, oh, is it a good time for you? Is it not? And maybe it's just me. Maybe everyone else listening to this podcast does not care and just makes contact with anyone whenever they want to. Or maybe it's because I've grown up in this, this era when there was like a status light, and you were like careful about, was someone just free or were they busy or whatever. Anyway, that is it for today's episode. I just thought that was a bit of a fun thing to share with you, a bit of history, I suppose, even though it wasn't that long ago. Anyway, until next time, bye-bye.